Once again, it's my pleasure and delight to be joined by Konstantin, one of the most respected voices on YouTube about what is happening inside Russia. As many of you know, he has one of the best known channels that has been analyzing Russia's descent into authoritarianism since the full-scale war began. And I know many of you will value the materials and insights he has. I also know that Konstantin monitors some of the best sources of information, especially vis-a-vis the Russian economy. And that is what we're going to dive in today, because with Trump's, dare I say it, national security policy, with the nonsense, with the bullying, with the attempt to humiliate allies, the attempt to humiliate Ukraine, that is gathering all the media oxygen. But it's very important to turn back and counter this narrative that Russia wants to put forward, that its victory is inevitable, that it's strong, and there's no point in resisting. This is not true. It's a story they want you to believe so you don't take action. And I think these kind of conversations are especially important to turn back and make people realize that the triumph of authoritarianism, the triumph of Putin are not inevitable. Konstantin, welcome back.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's fantastic to see you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. Looking forward to this conversation. It's always intellectually pleasing speaking with you about what's going on in Russia, and I hope that we'll have a lot of new information today so that helps people to understand the current position of what's going on.
I really hope so, because as I say, until a few weeks ago, the big story was Ukrainian highly successful strikes against Russian oil infrastructure, and that includes port infrastructure. It includes the Kosovo sort of supply line around Moscow, the refineries, hitting every node and every layer of that structure. And then, indeed, a couple of weeks ago, they started hitting empty shadow fleet vessels that were heading back to Novorossiysk to refill. Incredibly effective strategy, it would seem. However, that's all dropped off the radar. What's your take on that? How effective was that in reality? Has Russia been able to recover some of the capacity that was hit in those strikes?
Well, the strikes continue. The intensity of the strikes has slowed down a little bit, but still, Ukraine executes strikes, and every strike is a blow to Russian oil industry, oil exporting, oil refining. So they used to concentrate on oil refineries. Now, it seems like the strategy has shifted towards oil exporting, oil transportation, the Novorossiysk bombing not so long ago. It takes more and more capabilities of exporting Russian oil offline. And we're looking at the system right now. It's not just the Ukrainian strikes, it's the American sanctions on the Rosneft, Lukoil, it's the attacks on the shadow fleet. Russian export is shrinking and troubles inside Russia and domestic market are still there. Russians have patched up the industry, the market quite a bit, but there's still troubles.
Because we saw queues at the pumps, we saw various sort of supply side issues there. I haven't seen so much about that recently, so my assumption is that some of those bottlenecks have started to be reduced within the system. But yeah, if Ukraine is able to intensify these attacks once more, I guess, we saw this pattern with Biden in the election, didn't we? That when there is the so-called peace process on, Ukraine slightly lifts its hands off the oil throat, as it were, of Russia's economy. It's almost a kind of appeasement, as it were, to Trump. That may be why we're seeing it ease off, or it may be a capability problem. We just don't know whether they have the technical capability to scale this up or not at this time. But certainly, in your view, I think, and we've talked about this before, the only way to get any concession out of Putin is to keep the pressure up, isn't it? Actually, appeasing Putin is likely to increase the amount of demands and the unreasonable demands that he is going to make of the Ukrainian side.
Well, Vladimir Putin is a strongman. I think it's in its purest form. And he only understands the language of strength, language of power. That's the language he speaks himself. Okay, you can't appease Putin. You can force him to make some decisions, but appeasement, we've seen it so many times already, just doesn't work. Okay. Well, let's take this oil industry one more time. There's so much going on right now inside that we're not seeing. Perhaps you're right. I don't know why Ukraine has slowed down in the strikes. Okay. But all I know is that despite Russians have picked up a bit, there are different processes going on that are reshaping Russian refined oil product industry. So many smaller operators are either selling their businesses for pennies on dollar to large oil producers or simply closing their doors. And that trend is going to stay. Okay. Monopolization of the market is happening, and Ukrainians have done it. Okay. They have forced Russians to new rules of the game. That's language Putin understands. I'm afraid that's the only language he understands. So you have to be strong. That's all.
And in fact, weakness only elicits more aggression from him. I mean, there's a very, very sort
Exactly.
of clear
Exactly.
pattern of that.
Exactly.
And Trump has exuded nothing but weakness, unfortunately. The other thing, which is a key thing, and I don't think we talked when this had happened, but it seemed that the Urals crude price for a moment in sort of late November, early December, it hit $36 a barrel, which is one would assume well below the sort of even the production cost or production plus transportation cost. That must have set some real alarm bells going. Now, that wasn't reflected necessarily in the price of Brent crude. This is the sort of discounted Urals crude, which I guess factors in the idea that I believe around 44% of it is being transported by shadow fleet tankers. So Urals crude has a very different kind of pricing structure. But that must have caused panic in the Kremlin.
It has. I think it's a fact. The price did drop to $36. It rebounded a bit, but still, it's incredibly low price. The discounts now reach $20 of Brent. Now, it's really hard to say whether this price is already below the production cost or still above, still some profits are made. I tried to research. There's little information on how much actually Russian oil costs to produce and export. There are different numbers from different experts, but is it my understanding that the full cycle price, meaning from investigating oil field to shipping it out overseas, is in the mid 30s, low to mid 30s. Okay, so at $36 per barrel for Urals, Russian companies don't make a lot of money. They barely make anything, and that's a huge blow to Russian budget. Okay, to the cash flow for Putin. And don't forget that it's not just about the price; it's about the volume as well. The volume of Russian oil shipped overseas, exported, has been dropping significantly in the last couple of months because Trump did something right. He did something strong. He made the decision to sanction Russian oil, not in a hypothetical way, but he placed direct sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft. And you know what? Surprise, surprise, the sanctions work. And right now we're seeing that Putin, in panic, flew to India to make deal with the Indians, with Modi, to persuade them to continue buying Russian oil. Okay, he wouldn't have gone if things were all right with Russian oil. Okay, but he did go, and it was not the planned, but it was a rush visit. So it is panic, and it reaches all the way to the very top. Russian budget is in deep trouble. Close to $10 trillion, the deficit will be at by the end of the year. And they're printing money like crazy. And oil, the biggest bread maker for Putin, that precious that gives them funds, resources to finance the war and finance his servants, the Siloviki. Yeah, it's kind of not there any longer. So yes, panic, panic. Just as we discussed, remember, in the beginning of the year, forecasting that the end of 2025 would be extremely hard for Putin and for Russia, and then that's happening. So both of us were right on.
And of course, people are always complaining, well, it hasn't collapsed yet, blah, 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 don't cry wolf. The thing is, though, economies, and the Russian economy especially, is like a super tanker. It takes a long time for these processes to work their way through the system. But I think there's some interesting trends here. One is the prediction that Russia is going to be running a substantial federal deficit for 7 years straight. That's 2022 to 28. Now, we don't know what's going to change in that period, but even on the current sort of cost forecast, the current cost outlay, you've got 7 straight years of substantial deficit, with the sovereign wealth fund being essentially hollowed out. Really, into next year, there's not an awful lot left in the pot there. And if they were expecting that they could perhaps cover the difference on increased taxes and growth, they're disappointed there because it seems that growth rates are cut to 1% or lower, and the economy is stalled. Essentially, the economy driven by an expansion of the military industrial complex, that growth is over now. So they can't expect tax receipts over and above the absolute sort of minimal growth rates that we're currently seeing. Is that your assessment?
1%, we've been hearing that a lot throughout this year. 1% growth. What a difference from over 4% last year, right? What a downgrade. But I think that 1% growth number is sugar coated, very, very sugar coated. And no, I've said it all along. And now some of Russia's top experts, even those who are employed by the Russian state, they come out and say, well, very cautiously. But here and there we hear, well, perhaps it's going to be negative growth. you know, in other words, recession, decline. So I think that 1% is a very sugar-coated number. Now, I think that we will see the decline this year. I'm not sure whether they will announce it officially or not. We'll see in a few weeks, basically in 3 weeks. But I think this 2025 is minus, in the red. And then for the next 7 years, I dare to make even a bolder forecast. It's going to be longer than 7 years. I actually would like to hear the arguments of those who say 7 years. Why 7 years? The thing is, in order for Russia to start growing economically, a few things are needed. First of all, free markets, okay? And then, well, obviously the end of the war and peace with the rest of the world and with Ukraine and conditions of peace. Russia needs to have the rules of the game, some kind of economic stability, and it needs something that would be generating revenues for Russia, profits. Now, forget about natural gas. That's gone. Europe has made laws banning to buy Russian gas, starting from 2027. Forget about oil, because Russia is in trouble of pumping oil. It has very old oil fields, developed oil fields. I'm sure there's plenty of oil in Russia and other places, but undiscovered. And Russian oil companies need billions and billions of dollars to invest into the process of discovery. Discovery, assessment, and so forth. And it needs money and technology. And that can come from the West, from the rest of the world, right? Because there's no money in Russia, there's no investors. and there's no technology. So they need to go to other countries and say, hey, we know you have the technology, we know, but please help us. Now, obviously, in order to do that, the conditions have to be very different. And I really doubt that within 7 years, a lot of Western or foreign investors would return to Russia. I mean, there's so many. I mean, that'd be just insanity. Okay. So,
Very
what else
unlikely,
can
isn't
Russia?
it? Yeah.
How else can Russia, earn? Where can it get the revenues from? Oil is getting outdated because the world is slowly moving. It's a very slow movement, but it's still moving towards renewable energy sources. Now, more and more oil are being discovered. Now, Venezuela, I think, just about to start selling its oil again. Is it the country right next to Venezuela? Is it Guyana? Then Kazakhstan. There's more and more oil. Now, metals, ferrous, non-ferrous metals, more and more being discovered, and the production facilities are built all over Southeast Asia. Okay, and Russian metals are all of a sudden find competing against other countries, and that's so those were Russia's bread makers. Now, you tell me, how can Russia earn money? How can it start growing again? I don't really see any any way for the country to come back economically. So my understanding that it's going to take a very long time, and Russia is like Phoenix, would have to fall into ashes and then rise from the ashes. Now, when it rises from the ashes, that's a different story. But I doubt it's going to happen within 7 years.
No,
So
indeed.
that's my take.
I mean, there is one
I think
way, and
generation,
yeah,
generation. I think it's more of a generation.
yeah. There is one way. Of course, it's a very scary way because we know that the setup of the Soviet Union, to an extent, had as Moscow is a sort of, let's say, dare I say it, a parasitical entity on the rest of the country. In the USSR, there was a certain reliance on technologies, production resources of Central and Eastern Europe. Some of whom were advanced in all sorts of sectors. A reliance, of course, on Ukraine that provided engineers, space engineers, nautical engineers, etc., and aerospace as well. Yeah, well, one way, of course, is to reconquer Europe and then integrate the Russian market with that.
Good luck. Good
Now,
luck with that.
good luck with that. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you can see why that might be somewhere in Putin's head that this is the only way out of this. The other one, to ground it back in the kind of reality we're faced with, many Western countries, when they need the capital, as you say, for these big capital projects, they could go to international markets to raise capital at a relatively competitive rate. And as it's been pointed out, Russia does not have that capability. Even before the full-scale war, it does not have that same sort of, let's say, financial backing to be able to go to international markets. China is not going to provide those facilities of, low-cost credit for investment. That's not how China operates vis-a-vis Russia. So they're really stuck, as you say, the big capital requirements, but really no access to the markets to provide it.
I will add to that. There was an example in the past. Okay, I was experience. Russia transformed from the USSR to modern day country, and it had instant assistance of the world, basically the international community of the Western countries. It had instant access to cheap capital. It had lots of Western companies coming in, bringing in their technologies. Okay, it was embraced into the international community. It had not had a bloody war on its hands, and it still took Russia 10 years to transform, to rebound economic. 10 years. Okay, that was the perfect set of conditions one could ever think of. So that also tells me that this time it's going to be much longer, because they will be a grace period when things will change in Russia. Say, hey, we're good again. Wait a second, you have to prove by your behavior. And it's really hard to say what will be done, but Russia would have to prove its good intentions, okay, and a good nature, if it turns into good nature. And that's going to take a very long time. And only after quite a few years, if Russia behaves in a way a normal, peaceful country would, then it would take many, many small steps for Russia to come back and become part of the international community.
Absolutely.
So,
But it's heading in the other direction. I mean, there's an interesting quote here by Vladislav Inozemtsov writing that actually his analysis suggests that military spending will reach a real term ceiling in 2025, i.e., this year, right now, is probably the highest point of spending that Putin has access to in the military. It's only downhill from here. That has really interesting implications, of course, for the war in Ukraine. But we also have, and this is one of my absolute favorite Bond villains. He's a revolting character, which is Sergei Karaganov, who makes endless threats. He's been nicknamed Professor Doomsday. I call him Doctor Evil, but he's the one that comes out with the most extreme threats. Some of what he's saying is, though, echoed by Putin and others, and that is essentially that we're ready for war with Europe. Bring it on, is their message. Of course, the costs of mounting a full-scale kinetic war against Europe not only, I think, would end Russia as a sovereign entity, it would collapse the whole system. It would also potentially sort of bankrupt the country, even if there wasn't seismic political change. What do you make of these threats? Is this just another kind of negotiating stance? Is this just another bluff and bluster to try to prevent Europe from supporting Ukraine? Or is Putin pathological enough to think that he could take Europe on?
I don't think there can be a yes or no answer. It's not black and white. It's the grades, the shades of gray. Um, I would say it's not very likely that Putin would do that. Can he try to attack Europe? Of course he could. Now, I think the threats coming from Karaganov, Dugin, Solovyov are just that, empty threats, because they know that if there's a real war with Europe, they would be the very first victims. Karaganov would go among the first ones. Putin would go, and that makes me believe that that's more of empty threats. Now, are they? Well, I shouldn't be saying are they. Is he crazy enough to do that? Now, I think he is. Okay, and if he's cornered, if he thinks that there's no way out, and the end is near, very near, at the reach of hand, then he could try to make a strike. That's a possibility. How probable is that? You know, I don't know. I think the probability is low, but who knows? Now, we talked before, a couple months before, that there was a possibility of Russia attacking the Baltic states, achieving easy victory. That hasn't happened. I don't think Russia would do anything in the winter time. Not the best time for, Russian military with its broken logistics. And another thing that is gives me optimism about this military strike or lack of military strike to Europe. Look at what's going on in the front lines right now. Russia has been selling Russians domestically and foreigners all over the world this idea that Russia is victorious, Russia is advancing. Now, I looked at the map, and I'm not a military expert, okay, but I just use common sense sometimes. I looked at the map, and Russia is trying to take Chasiv Yar right now. Okay, that's fierce fighting. And Chasiv Yar is only 16 kilometers, which is what, 11 miles from Bakhmut. Now, Bakhmut, Russia had been trying to take Bakhmut for 1 year, and it finally did so in May of 2023, 2 years ago. Now, how far Russian troops advanced from Bakhmut into the Ukrainian territory? Was it like 10 miles? Something like that, 11 miles? What war? What, are they going to execute missile strikes? I probably could do that if their missiles even launch, But I don't think they have nearly any capability of executing some kind of land invasion into the Baltic states now or other places. They're trying to replenish the losses right now. The reports are coming that they're taking people from hospitals, wounded soldiers who are on crutches, and send them back to the Ukrainian front lines in Ukraine. If they had a fairly stable situation on the front lines, then they wouldn't have done that, right? So it shows the desperation of Putin and the generals. Most likely, Putin is pushing them, giving them deadlines, milestones, and then they trying to achieve the milestones and meet the deadlines in any way possible. And now they are doing it in a very barbaric way. Okay. Poor Ukrainians, they get bombarded every day. But look what they're doing to their own, to Russian soldiers. Basically the same thing. They take people who can't fight and throw them, sending them to actually die. Okay.
And now not even with equipment. I mean, they're minimally equipped, some of these people. Some are
On
apparently
crutches. On crutches.
not
I,
even sent
I, I
with
showed in
guns,
my
some of them.
reports.
Yeah, yeah. It is barbaric. It shows a complete lack of humanity, and of course, the military hierarchy. Those who are prepared to then execute those orders equally. It's not just Putin. It's those in the entire military structure who are prepared to follow through with that rather than lose their own position. Um, it is extraordinary.
Can
But
I
this,
can I
yeah,
can I interrupt
yeah,
you, please? I apologize.
yeah.
I find this is a very important point right here. Now, we talk of so many different things. How many conversations have we had? 20 plus
20
over
or
the years,
30 by now,
probably
at least 30
30,
probably. Although,
30,
yeah,
right? At least 30, right? And Jonathan, we cover everything about Russia, economy, society, definitely a lot of military stuff, but this is the most important thing about Russia. And I want everyone to know that. It's not about the economy. It's not about the technology. It's not about Putin, and it's not about Siloviki. It's about what's happening inside Russian people. They have lost their empathy and humanity. That is the biggest problem for the country, for the future of the country. Okay? Who is sending these people on crutches to go back to Ukraine? Is it Putin himself? Comes down and says, no, you, and you go. No. The generals, well, they give orders. But it's regular folks on the ground, just like the same kind of people, just like those soldiers on the crutches, only they happen to hold a different role within Russian army. And it's them personally being animals, okay, and sending people to die. It's Russian people who live in big cities, small towns, in the villages, who they all understand by now the tragedy that is happening in Ukraine. They all understand something's fishy. They all understand it's not about denazification. It's not about um, demilitarization of Ukraine. They all understand. You're gonna be dumb as a rock not to understand that. Okay, so everyone with brain understands. Yet they're silent, and a lot of them support. A lot of Russians denounce other Russians. They write letters to the KGB, and then KGB knocks on the doors of those people, takes them away, and then sends them to Gulag, to prisons. Okay, it's not Putin doing that. Putin doesn't write denunciation letters, just like Stalin didn't write them. It's regular Russian folks happy to serve, happy to strike down a neighbor, perhaps family member, a friend, to get some benefits, or perhaps just pure satisfaction. That is a tragedy of Russian people, and that's happening inside every one of them, in their hearts. Economy can be fixed. Infrastructure can be repaired. We can't bring people back who were killed, right? But we can fix everything else. Russia can even fix Ukraine if it wanted to, rebuild all the infrastructure as a part of this repentance process, right? That is the easy part. The toughest part is how to fix what's broken here inside every single Russian, or at least a lot of them. And that's where I see this tragedy. And I personally don't even know how to approach that.
No, I'm with you on that. It's something I think about endlessly, how you deal with that, how you deal with the Siloviki architecture that holds the whole system in place. How do you rip it out and get rid of it? But it's that individual attitude from every person, not just the military, but every person who maybe works as a junior in a voenkomat, who's prepared to ignore
Yeah.
regulations and follow orders that they know to be illegal.
Forget orders, forget
Yeah.
officials, forget voenkomat, forget Siloviki military. It's about people. You know what happens now with me? Now, I don't even try to appeal to Russian people I've known for years, for my life, some of them. I don't tell them, oh, it's you're responsible for Ukraine as well. No, I tell them I am responsible. I, Konstantin, am guilty and responsible, and I take responsibility. And you know what happens then? When they hear that I expressed the opinion that I am responsible and guilty, they get mad at me, saying, "No, you're not. You are not responsible. You didn't start that." I said, "Wait a second. I'm talking about myself. This is how I feel. You don't have a right to feel that way. Why is that so? Because you're not responsible. You couldn't do anything. You didn't press the button." And they go extra mile trying to make their points. And I've heard it so many times already. Okay, they get mad at me for admitting my guilt and my responsibility. And this is something absolutely brand new. I have not heard that before. Okay, because they know if I admit it and I, Konstantin, take responsibility, which I do, okay, that automatically puts them into the same category. Okay, so in the past it was about them, they got mad. Now they get mad about me. So that's how bad it is. And I don't even just bring up the officials, the military, the Siloviki, those folks, the brain dead, okay?
Mm. Yeah, and in the Siloviki, some of them are super smart. I'm more angry with people who are clever, who know the difference between right and wrong, and yet choose to, as you say, do these things anyway. It absolutely sort of maddens. Um, yeah, I have no idea how to fix this. Absolutely none whatsoever, to be honest. I mean, maybe Germany and Japan after the war provide at least some kind of template for how you can sort of start to turn things around, but it's a multi-generational process. But of course, looking back at the economic issues, there's interesting things happening which I think are we've talked about, but which are very much missed. And this is the two-speed economy in Russia. You have, and we talked about this, I think we're the first in terms of podcast to talk about this, which is how Russia is quite probably, quite likely going to end up being a quasi kleptocratic market economy with a lot of features of the Soviet Union and the military-industrial complex. Rearming is going to be the more likely outcome than disarming, even following a peace in Ukraine when it comes. And we're seeing that happen now. We've got a two-speed economy where the military is given priority over everything. But we do nominally have a civilian economy running side by side, but it's deflating. It's not growing. It's been deprived of resources and manpower. And as we've also talked, it regularly gets sort of, companies get taken over and the market is interfered with continuously in favor of loyalists and those who support the military industrial complex. See, I don't see that being deconstructed very easily either. In fact, the more likely tendency seems to me that the two-speed economy and the remilitarization is the more likely course of events over the next couple of years.
I like the term two-speed economy. One speed is shrinking a great deal. So it's going to be 1.5 speed economy soon. Because what's happening in the military part of the economy is that the state runs the show. The state had been pumping the military industrial complex with money. Money has run out. The military, some of large factories have started laying people off. Ural Vagon Zavod, Russia's premier war factory, produces
That's the one I
tanks.
was going to mention.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they first announced that, in a very Russian manner, they said about 2 months ago, yeah, things are absolutely fine. It's just we're going to switch all the employees who are a part of the civil part of the plant because it's dual purpose plant, okay, that produces military products and some kind of like civil economy products. So we take that civil part and we're going to transfer people to 4-day work week instead of 5-day, but that equals 20% pay cut. That's what it is. Okay. They never say that. They say, well, we're just giving people more time to rest. Fine. And then everything is great, except for, yeah, we're just doing that. But, and then they started laying people off, including from the war part. Okay. So a very Russian way of approaching and expressing that everything is fine, going according to the plan. So I'm just showing you that even in the military industrial complex, things are not well. There's no money. That all comes down to one thing. Money has run out. Now, the civil part of the economy, that's what you mentioned, it's still operating, but it's dying. It's dying. It's shrinking at very alarming, well, catastrophical rate, I should say. We are seeing troubles everywhere in all industries. We are seeing the layoffs. We're seeing bankruptcies, record high numbers. We're seeing companies getting liquidated or going to bankruptcy. So the biggest problem for Russian civil part of the economy is that no one needs it. In the state, they need money. Their goal is to squeeze the businessmen out of money through taxes, licenses, fees, and so forth as much as possible, because that's the only place where they can get money. Forget about oil, no more. Forget about gas. Forget about mineral resources. Now, people are second oil, they say in Russian, and they trying to squeeze. Well, guess what? You can only squeeze that much. After some time, businessman says, you know what, I throw in the towel. I liquidate my company and I move out of Russia to go try to do business someplace else. There are many countries out there, okay? And I start seeing that happening. People I know, couple have decided to do exactly that. And quite a few people are considering what to do next. And a possible option is to close down and get the hell out of Russia. Okay, so no one really cares about economic development. There is not such institution in Russia. There is a Ministry of Economic. I've been there. Okay, they invited me about 9 years ago to be an expert on energy expansion into other countries. So I went to the Ministry of Economic Development. I saw inside how they operate. Trust me, there's no Ministry of Economic Development. They don't care. They have different goal. They're bureaucrats with one goal, uh, to support the state and to survive in their jobs. That's
And
it.
enrich
So
themselves, if they can, they want
yes,
to,
oh,
yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
obviously. Well, that's their social contract with the state. Each person who enters the vertical of power um, must be loyal. That's number one. Must obey orders and without any asking any questions. Okay, and do it swiftly. Um, in return, he or she gets nice pay by Russian standards and ability to use power at hand given by the state that comes with the job to enrich themselves. Okay, that's very simple agreement between the state and people who serve the state. That's all. The thing is, they are given orders to get more money, and they don't care if they're cutting the chicken who lays eggs. They need meat now. What happens after, they don't care. It's not their order. The order is to get money now. So I have very, very sad forecast for the second speed. First speed will go on. Okay, the military part of the economy. The second speed will shrink a great deal. It will not die off completely, but it will shrink to the point where it's going to be one and a half speed economy, or perhaps even less so.
Even less because some of the stories being reported here, and you mentioned Ural, Vagonzavod, and several others, Kronstadt, which is a drone producer. They're reporting mounting debts, unpaid state contracts, court battles over arrears, and in one case, tank shipments that were made in January remain unpaid now at the end of the year. So even the defense sector is starting to, feel the pain of this. But of course, no one's going to complain too loudly because no one wants to fall out of windows or have sort of,
You
improbable
can't you
accidents
can't
occur
complain.
to
You can't
them.
sue. You can't demand. How can you? Who are you
Yeah,
gonna demand from? The federal budget,
yeah.
from the Ministry of Defense, from Putin, from you know. Wow,
You can't
we're seeing
speak out
we're
there. Yeah.
seeing the final act. It's going to be a very long act, perhaps, and not the fast one, but that's the final act.
Yeah, exactly as Vladimir Milov also states, it's not going to collapse imminently, but we are seeing that end phase. And the last bit today really tops that out because in addition to all of these financial and resource issues, there is, of course, the problem of recruitment. And that's both a human issue and it's also a finance issue because they're relying on huge bonuses, recruitment bonuses, to get the number of people into that war machine that they needed. And there's two things the people are running out. Key positions in the civilian economy are now having to be filled by workers from Central Asia. That surely is going to cause a lot of friction, and it shows what's kind of going on with, let's say, the more sort of ethnic Russian or minorities within Russia. They're having to pull people in from, former parts of the empire. But regions like Yakutia are practically bankrupt and they're no longer even to pay the bonuses. If they don't pay the bonuses, then how are they going to get the recruits they need? I mean, either they're not, or surely they're going to have to turn to actual coercion and terror in order to get the people they need to fill the ranks of the army and the trenches. on the front?
Well, these are two different problems. Okay. At this point, from the data that I have, 64 provinces of Russia, so-called regions of Russia, are bankrupt, or actually they are in red. Let's put it this way. Most of their debt is to the federal budget, and the federal budget is writing those debts off, but it does not provide any more money because the money is needed at the local level to pay all those employees, you know, who are, who are employed by the state, the teachers, the doctors, the policemen, the firefighters, the bureaucrats, the officials of the provincial governments. So there's no money to pay them. Some of the provinces are going to commercial banks and borrow. Not from the federal budget like they used to, but from commercial banks. Now, the federal budget most likely will write your debts off, okay? The commercial bank can't do that. So, and it's not the federal government that's got to go. That's the commercial bank. So that's adding more to the crisis of the banking industry. Now, that is the problem that the provinces are facing. The recruitment is not really the problem of the provinces. It's the problem of the federals, the federal government. Now, there's local provinces in Russia. That the governors are installed. They're appointed from Moscow. Okay, and then they report to the Kremlin, and they were given a strict order to raise people by any means possible. That's why we saw all those crazy sign-up bonuses. 1 first and 2, 3, now up to 4.5 million rubles for signing up. They weren't paid by the federal government. They were paid by the local governments. But money was supposed to be reimbursed, from the federal budget. Now, some of them have been, and some are not getting reimbursed. And now, once money has dried up, the local provinces, they don't have this obligation to supply more and more soldiers anymore. How can we do that, they ask. You don't give us money, therefore you do not get soldiers. Plain and simple. That's why we have seen a wave of decreasing those sign-up bonuses. And the minimal level is the 400,000 rubles. That's the federal level. Everything above 400 is the local level, the provinces. Now it's down to the bare bones, 400 from the federal budget. That's it. Well, that's not the problem of the governors any longer, and not the problem of the provinces. The problem of the Kremlin, of the Ministry of Defense. Well, they have come up with a brilliant solution. They have declared another mobilization. They have around 2 million people in active reserve. And the thing is, when the people were signing up for active reserve, the conditions were that the state didn't have a right to place them into the war, to place them outside Russia. The active reserve was strictly for defending, Russia, and pretty much it. So there were conditions for active reservists to actually be called to serve, right? So what does the Russian state do? The obvious, they expected. It cheats. It changes the law, the federal law, and now the new law states that, the reservists now can be taken and be placed into the special situations to fight, such as a counter-terrorist operation. And they can be placed outside Russia if national interests require so. That's brilliant. So that problem solved. Jonathan, there's no more problem. 2 million reservists. Okay, now incredibly intensive mobilization campaign. I've said it many times. Okay, it was going to be hidden from the public, very silent, very quiet, because they already made mistake of making the mobilization public, and people started running away from Russia. I lived through it myself. Now they changed laws, they changed procedures, they instructed people to make it very quiet. Incredibly intensive mobilization happening. The reason they give in to the reservists is you're going to protect different civil facilities, such as oil refineries and such. And most likely they will be protecting for some time, for a few weeks. And then those people signed contracts with the Ministry of Defense. They must follow orders. And if their superior comes and says, you know what, there's a decision, there's an order for you to go and be placed, in the front lines. What can you do? Nothing. You must follow orders. Otherwise, you'll be considered as a deserter. Okay. And they are calling people left and right. So it's how they're dealing with this problem of lack of people in the front lines, which is very disturbing news, because that's the only advantage Russia has over Ukraine, a number of people it can call up, it can mobilize. Everything else, as far as I understand, there's no upper hand. But there are 140 plus million Russians, half of them are men. Imagine how many people Russia can call up if it declares war, or if it decides to mobilize a lot more. So that's disturbing.
Yeah, definitely. And this is a wake-up call for Ukraine's Western allies to get their act together and give it the resources it needs, not just to survive on the edge, but to survive resoundingly and push the invaders back. But we've allowed this problem to fester and grow and become more malignant through our lack of action. And this is the problem, as the Russian phrase has, sow the wind, reap the whirlwind. And unfortunately, it's going to cost a lot more to solve this problem in terms of lives and resources, because we've delayed the difficult decisions. But hopefully people will be listening to this and it will motivate them to change those policies. Konstantin, thank you to everything you do. I know the audience appreciates it. We get a view of what's happening in Russia, a realistic view, which I think is important for decision makers and activists alike. Thank you for coming back on.
Jonathan, thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Many of you generously contributed to buying a truck, a 4x4 vehicle, for the armed forces of Ukraine in our recent marathon fundraiser for Car for Ukraine. That vehicle was delivered thanks to your generosity and refitted in Lviv with life-saving reinforcements, the doors, windows, and the engine area. That vehicle was destroyed a few weeks after it was delivered at the front in a drone attack. All 3 servicemen survived with only minor scratches and concussion. Your generosity in funding the vehicle was instrumental in saving the lives of all 3 Ukrainian soldiers. Now we are launching our Christmas Tree Trucks 2025 campaign. The goal is to raise €11,000. So please help us buy another vehicle for one of the most effective Ukrainian brigades on the 4th Christmas of Ukraine's epic fight for survival against an imperialistic and genocidal neighbouring state. Help us celebrate the heroism of the soldiers who have held the line against all the odds, who fight for their freedom and pay a terrible price, while also, incidentally, protecting the freedoms of Europe.